story from Trex Bunny 79. Lazy manager learns how not to treat a dependable employee. Working in retail most of my life, I have encountered some really bad managers. As such, I know I became a pretty petty employee and I've served up some sweet malicious compliance in my day. This is by far my favorite story though, because it even has a touch of petty revenge. TL. DR at bottom. Years ago, when I was just a newlywed, I worked for an auto parts retailer. We serviced professional garages as well as walk-in customers. My job was as a merchandiser. This meant it was my duty to keep up with displays and inventory. I checked in shipments and put them away every day. I put up the sales images in the windows, and when areas needed to be changed, stock moved, new price labels put up, etc., that was my job. Those tasks didn't usually take all day. I could get them done in a few hours. The rest of my day was spent working the counter, answering calls, helping customers, cleaning, and getting to take the delivery truck out to deliver parts to the garages. Driving deliveries was the best. I could listen to the radio, have a soda, and visit with the clients. But I had the misfortune of working for the laziest manager I've ever known. We'll call him LM for short. Seeing a trustworthy worker who had a good relationship with the clients, LM began putting more responsibilities on me. Time wore on, and my job description was forgotten. I started having to answer his emails, deal with the interstore and corporate memos that came in, and running deposits to the bank when the assistant manager wasn't there. Meh, this wasn't a big deal. It took maybe 45 minutes at most each day, and I wasn't having to deal with the often misogynistic walk-in customers. So I didn't mind. Then came the day our assistant manager left. I can't remember if he quit or got a transfer or what, long time ago doesn't matter. LM decides, since I'm so dependable, to give me keys to the store and start scheduling ME to close so he can go home to his wife and kids. Hey, it's more hours, so I don't mind at first. And he dangles that lovely promotion over my head. Ooh, the thought of a raise had me jumping because, as I said, I was a newlywed and we were saving to buy a house. The promotion never came. According to LM, I didn't have the required ASE certification to be an assistant manager. So I was still on payroll as a merchandiser despite the fact that I was now. Opening the store, 6:30 a.m. Closing the store, there till after 10 p.m. some nights. Making deposits. Making sure all the drawers had proper change. Handling emails, answering interstore and corporate memos. Checking in stock and controlling inventory. Making sure the store looked as it should. Still handling the counter to cover lunch breaks for everyone else. Still making deliveries, handling the majority of the professional client accounts. Handling employment applications and interviews for new hires. Entering the schedule and adjusting payroll for all the other employees. I was full on doing the assistant manager job with nothing to show for it except circles under my eyes because LM was constantly changing my schedule to suit his needs. Anytime I tried to tweak the schedule to give myself even 2 days off in a row, he'd come in behind me and change it. All he basically did was cover for me on my rare days off and spent most of his day with customers or going out for professional visits with a couple of clients who were friends of his. LM's attitude nearly cost us some of our big accounts, but since I was constantly driving a delivery truck on top of everything else, I had a better relationship with most of the clients. We're in the South. Even grease monkeys won't be rude to a lady. I was able to get them to keep their business with us. It helped that I was a slightly plump and sweet-faced young woman. My calming manner and reasonable politeness could always calm them down. But you're waiting for malicious compliance. Here it comes. Our store got a major revamp. We're talking overtime, new displays, grand reopening. It was huge. This also occurred around the same time as the big yearly week-long management conference. So my hours skyrocketed. After LM got back from the management conference, he took off for another week to spend time with his family, leaving me in charge again. It was pure hell. For 2 months, I worked practically non-stop. I think in a 90-day period after that grand reopening, I had 3 days off. The last straw came when I opened a corporate memo reminding LM that his ASE certification had never been completed and he needed to contact them about setting up a time for the test. What? All this time and he wasn't even certified either? I was done. It was time to lay it on the line. After a late night close where I didn't get home until 11 p.m., I was back in the store at 6:30 a.m. to open. I hadn't had a full day off in 3 weeks at this point. I was doing my usual duties, getting ready for the other employees to show up when in walks LM. You know how this goes. I won't insult your intelligence. LM. Oh, hey, I just wanted to drop in and remind you to make sure you do the payroll today. Me? Of course I'm going to do payroll today. It's on my list. Note, I'm speaking in a sleep-deprived, depressed tone because I was completely exhausted. LM. Good, and I saw there's some new display materials still back here. You should have gotten that done already. Me? We were slammed yesterday and had 2 guys call in sick. I didn't have time. I'll get it done. Hey, listen, I've been meaning to ask you. I know we don't have anyone else asking for time off right now. I've got time saved up and I could really use a vacation. LM? Cuts me off. No. Me. What? LM. No way. I need you here. My anniversary is next week and I promised my wife. Me? I cut him off. Seriously? Everybody else here gets to take long weekends or full weeks of vacation and I'm burning out. I've been working near solid for the last 3 months, including the whole weekend of my husband's birthday. LM. Well, I'm the boss and I get to say who gets vacation. You can have Sunday off or something. It was Tuesday, I think, can't remember, but Sunday was several days away. Me? So done with his crap, I start raising my voice. No, that's not good enough. I'm tired, I'm worked to the bone, and I'm answering calls at my own house with our business name. You go home every night to your wife and kids, and a clean house, and supper waiting and your laundry done, and there's no one at my house doing that while I'm here 60 hours a week. I want my vacation, and you're going to approve it. Either that, or you sit down here right now and put in for my raise and a promotion. LM. You can't just make demands like that. You don't have the ASE certification anyway. I can't just hand you a promotion. You need to calm down. Me? Gritting my teeth at this point and ready to shove that corporate memo down his throat. Just give me a set schedule and a long weekend then. I need more than 1 day off a month. LM laughs at me. Ha, that's not how this works. I need you here and I'll schedule you when I need you. If you want a set schedule and a raise, you might as well look for another job. Now, little note, I kept my keys to the store on a special little keychain that I always clipped to my belt loop. When he said that, it was malicious compliance time. I jerked the keys off my belt loop and threw them at him. Me? Fine, I will. Run it your damn self. I turn and start walking to the back door. LM. Hey, get back here. You're scheduled to work today. I'm not even supposed to be here. He probably should have thought of that before he decided to drop in on me on his day off. I'm out the door and heading to my car, fuming. He's at the door with my keys in his hand. LM, what are you doing? Me? What does it look like I'm doing? I'm quitting. You told me to look for another job, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I drove off, leaving him in the parking lot, gaping at me like a goldfish. When I got home, he was already calling, and my husband had picked up. The idiot was actually asking my husband if I'd really quit, and if I'd come back into work, maybe once I'd calmed down. I ended up being contacted at home by the district manager. I told him everything. He admitted that ASE certification was only really required for managers and there was no reason I shouldn't have been promoted to assistant. I brought up that I should really just lawyer up and sue them for gender discrimination. He offered me a generous severance package if I promised not to sue. I was so tired and done with the whole company that I agreed. I got my last 60-plus hour paycheck mailed to me, and then also got a second check for 80 hours of paid vacation. The LM had to run the place by himself for a couple days until the district manager got him help. He didn't last with the company very long after that. TL. Doctor. Extremely overworked me asks for vacation or promotion to compensate for the hard work. Lazy manager refuses, tells me if I want better hours or pay to look for another job. I quit on the spot to go look for another job. Edit. For those wondering why I didn't get the ASE certification, it requires a certain amount and type of work experience that I did not have. I couldn't have qualified for it or tested for it, even if he'd allowed me the time off to go and sit for the test. Google it sometime. The malicious compliance was perfect. OP followed LM's own words, quitting immediately when told to find another job. The swift exit left LM scrambling, exposing his incompetence. OP's bold move, followed by a satisfying severance deal, made for a flawlessly executed revenge. Story from You Messed Up 12. New boss destroys everything for everyone. Buckle up, this is a long one. Obligatory on mobile, English is my first language, so all typos are my fault. No TLDR because that. I spent the time to write all this out so you can read it or move on. I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college. Great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly, an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, goes out of his way to not micromanage, didn't care as long as the work got done, borderline forced people to take PTO, we have unlimited, and I averaged 30 to 40 days off a year, and believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. Last 3 years, I got 9%, 13%, and a promotion, and 7% raises. We worked remote through COVID, and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the HCOL city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. Boss approved the change, and when HR tried to do a COL adjustment to my salary, boss told them no because I'll be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people, the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I'd been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the years, but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized into working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different than the team's normal day-to-day work. We'd been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. Boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up, we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. Super complex, $100,000 to millions lost if a mistake was made. And since it was the fastest growing part of the business by far, we were super busy. Now around 2 years ago, boss's boss gets promoted from his vice president role up to a senior vice president spot and hires a new VP. This new VP comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly. Tries to make everything a trackable metric, even where it really doesn't make sense, i.e. tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. Counted as one even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks, or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. Wanted each project to go out faster, even if they weren't due for a week, we were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. Tried to force my boss to assign work to the team, instead of us all picking up from a central queue as we could, etc., etc. Boss pushed back as much as possible, but was getting on constantly by new VP because the useless metrics VP wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations. Despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago, boss had enough of just getting consistently shit on by VP and took a new job and left. Boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few hundred employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role, as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. VP interviews most tenured and a bunch of external candidates, and goes with someone from his previous company. Now, this lady will be referred to as Bitch Boss from here on out for soon to be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom, changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say, started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. The team from the best in the company to the worst. It took Bitch Boss about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and try to rework our processes. Bitch Boss started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she's doing, and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us about our metrics being the worst on the team. Despite us working on the super complex projects that took 10 to 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did. Bitch Boss told us that if we didn't meet the expected metrics, we would be put on PIPs. So we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric, X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos as my small sub-team suddenly stopped picking up complex projects and just focused on completing simple projects to get our metrics up. Very quickly, the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response. Bitch Boss has told us we have to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately, that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact Bitch Boss for help getting them completed. This did not go over well with her or VP, as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused, as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric but still insisted we work on the complex ones as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the SVP got involved. The SVP was the one who created the complex sub-team to begin with and sided with us against the VP and Bitch Boss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a PIP. So we did. At this point, the other 3 people on the sub-team had seen the writing on the wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave ASAP. They were all office-based in the HCOL area still. Bitch Boss changed the team from come in 1 to 2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office. Most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her BS than I did remote. I had not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding honeymoon before he left. This happened to occur about 3 months after Bitch Boss started, and about a month after the whole PIP blow-up. Bitch Boss was pissed at how we showed her up in front of the SVP and was doing everything she could to make our life miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left, no notice. And one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the PIP fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus, with morale so low, we didn't bother to put in any extra effort anymore. In fact, the whole team was significantly behind as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So, Bitch Boss decided that she was cancelling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her there was no chance I'm missing my wedding and honeymoon for work, and I'm taking the full leave, and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She beezed, yelled, and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was cancelled, and if I didn't show up, it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied, Sing VP and SVP, and some other sales VPs who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation, it's my wedding honeymoon, and that I appreciated the opportunity but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from Bitch Boss. I got Slack messages from SVP and several of the sales VPs almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by Bitch Boss and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I wouldn't be there at all to work on them, etc. SVP eventually shut it down, but it was a fun read. I didn't reply to the Slack messages or do any work the rest of that day. Just turned everything off and went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning and very hungover to a few voicemails on my phone from SVP asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the SVP. He was very understanding, asked me to come back, listened to all my complaints and eventually made an offer. Basically, if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus, I would get my full PTO, and when I got back, Bitch Boss would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub-team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted. Weddings are expensive. So I tried to train people to cover for me, impossible task, then leave on my PTO. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. VP called me a few times when the 4th guy from my sub-team quit with no notice about 1.5 weeks in. But I ignored him and didn't respond. I come back refreshed and ready for the show I know is waiting. It was chaos. All the salespeople were slacking and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving hadn't been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my Slack and emailed the sales VPs directly asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Bitch Boss never tried to talk to me or interfere. VP did a few times. At one point, he tried to make me work weekends to catch up. I refused. This went on for about a month or so. Bitch Boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub-team, and I never brought it up. They did, however, have the larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 4 to 6 month training process my old boss developed was ignored, and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end, which resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I had started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in same later stages, but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from Bitch Boss to go over my bonus/raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus, lowest possible, and a 0% raise. Justified it with a bunch of BS, not a team player, metrics bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires, etc., etc. I didn't really argue or care at that point. At that point, I really quiet quit. Cut my daily output to below half, just did the bare minimum, and waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point, the sales team is getting pissed because the complex stuff basically isn't getting done. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise bonus, but with me barely working, everything was falling behind again. Bitch Boss smelled weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started chewing me out on the call in front of everyone saying I was lazy and not doing my job ect. I let her rant, then just said, if you give me the lowest bonus possible and a 0% raise, you get 0% effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job, and left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains ECT to call me out for not working, and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on Slack, and just responded with the 0% effort blurb on every email. This infuriated her. I still hadn't gotten another job offer, but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when VP set up a Zoom call with me, I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side. I told him for a 0% raise, I'm giving 0% effort, and he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise bonus. He has to approve the bonus raise amounts. I called him out on his BS and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I didn't go back my old level of output and said the people I had been training in complex projects could take over for me soon, so I wasn't as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about. I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging Bitch Boss asking about the training, because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. Agreed it was awful of Bitch Boss to do that to my bonus to raise and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point and knew he needed me more than I needed him. So I told him I need a 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary, or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen ECT-ect. So I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait, and he'd bring SVP onto the call. SVP tried to talk my demand down. At that point, I realized it wasn't worth it. I refused the significantly lower counteroffer, thanked the SVP for everything he did for me, and said I was quitting immediately. VP tried to say, I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period. I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here, so I didn't care and logged off. SVP tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so, but I refused. A few weeks later, I got a job offer and accepted. I've been working at the new company for a while now, and it's pretty shitty. Better than the old company, but nowhere close to what I had before with my old boss. Although old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for. So I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit. He refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave as soon as possible, and everything, even the simple stuff, is weeks overdue. Apparently, Bitch Boss is getting thrown under the bus by VP and will be fired soon. This story is a masterclass in how to destroy a high-performing team through toxic management. The OP's account of their experiences with Bitch Boss is both infuriating and relatable. The story's themes of workplace toxicity, the importance of employee well-being, and the consequences of poor management are timely and relatable. The author's decision to quit and stand up for themselves is a powerful reminder that employees deserve respect and fair treatment. Story from Packrat2488. Try to be lazy and get me to do your job, I'll let you fail. This happened 2 decades ago. Some background. My first job was at a fast food chain. I worked hard, impressed the store manager, and got myself promoted. At the time, I was still 17. So I was promoted to team leader, with implication that I would get promoted further when I was older. I was still in high school, so I worked the evening shift which started at 4 and ended at 12. The evening manager was a good guy who also worked hard and as a result had gotten promoted to a store manager position at a different location. Since they needed a manager, and I wasn't old enough, they hired a new manager who I'll call Karen. So Karen is hired and starts shadowing the current night manager, learning the ropes. After 2 weeks, he departs and she is now set take over. That's where this story really starts. I normally get in around 30 minutes early. One of my responsibilities is to make a position chart, which tells the workers where they are working that night. I need to hand it off to the manager for approval before posting it. As I arrive, I notice one of our night shift workers is already there. We'll call her Jen. She is sitting in the lobby crying and being consoled by other employees. I always found her to be a bit manic, but she was a nice girl. She had a rough home life, so I didn't hold it against her. Come to find out, she had just had a large fight with her mother, which ended with her getting kicked out. So she is effectively homeless. Good reason to be upset. I ask her if she needs the night off. She says no, she needs the money. I can't disagree and head off to get started. For the night shift, the night manager typically runs the drive-through register after day shift leaves. There are a few reasons for this. First, this means that the manager has control of the drawer and money for the entire night. This eliminates the possibility of employees having short draws. Second, this also puts the manager as the person interacting with the customers. I lived in a college town, so drunken guys drive through all the time and just want to chat up the pretty face behind the register. Third, it gives the manager the least amount of responsibilities as far as cleanup. So, given what I now know, I make up a position chart and place Karen on the register and Jen on a fryer where she can get help if she can't focus. I walked to the office to hand off the chart to night manager and was surprised that he wasn't there. He normally is in at least an hour before shift to make sure everything is ready. That's when I remembered this will be Karen's first night alone. I groan inwardly. This is going to be a trial by fire kind of night. The day manager is there, but no sign of Karen. It's now 10 minutes to shift, and even day manager is wondering what's up. I fill day manager in about Jen, show her the chart, and ask if it looks good. She agrees, and I said I'll post it for now, and Karen can sign it when she gets in. I had just finished posting the position chart when Karen shows up looking frazzled. She heads for the office without a word to anyone. Meanwhile, people start getting into position and ready for the shift. A few minutes later, Karen walks up, pulls my position chart, and replaces it with a new one. Again, she walks off without a word. According to the new position chart, Jen is working the drive-through and Karen is working nothing. Her name isn't there. She has another employee working 2 positions and the whole shift working effectively 1 person short. What the freak? I head to the office where Karen and day manager are talking and ask for some clarification. I explain there must be a mistake. Karen, no, that's right. Me. But you're not in a position and worker is working 2 positions. Karen. Well, how am I supposed to be in charge if I'm in a position? Day shift and I just stare at her blankly. Day shift. You need to be in position. You are accounted for in the labor calculations. Karen. Well, I have 6 years of management experience and I have never needed to fill a position to get the job done. Things are going to change around here. We do things my way now. Now, she just spent the last 2 weeks shadowing a manager that walked her through every step of the job. She knows she should be in position and why. This shouldn't even be a question. She just wants to spend the shift sitting in the office, and everyone knows it. At this point, day shift manager and I are sharing horrified glances at each other. I tell Karen that she'll need to go get people moved around if that's what she wants, because it's her plan. She gives an exasperated sigh and heads that way. I turn to day shift and plead with her to call the store manager and let her know what's going on. She agrees. I head back to the line and start working. After a short time later, day shift pulls me aside and says that the store manager said it is Karen's shift. She is in charge. She makes the decisions. Then she leaves for the night. The shift proceeds to implode in a spectacular fashion. Less than an hour in, the employee working 2 positions is so far in the weeds that orders are taking 3 times as long to get out. The drive-through is backed up, and the guys stuck at the window waiting are trying to flirt with Jen, who is having none of it and getting more annoyed by the minute. As the wait gets longer and longer, the people are becoming more and more irritated as they get to the window, and they are taking it out on Jen. Things are starting to get out of hand, and Karen is nowhere to be seen. I go to the office to let her know we need help and find her watching a portable TV. I start to tell her what's going on, and she cuts me off. She tells me, get back on the line, do my job, and stop bothering her. I was about to try and explain when I just thought, you know what? Screw that. Cue malicious compliance. I turned, walked back to the line, and watched the situation unfold. 30 minutes later, a car at the window is giving Jen an earful about how long she has been waiting. She calls her worthless, and Jen goes off. She takes the large strawberry milkshake next to her, chucks it at the lady and calls her a fat, ugly k. The lady and the inside of her car are covered in pink goo. Everything went so silent you could hear a pin drop. Then the lady starts screaming. Jen closes the window on her and walks calmly to the back. The lady peels around the front and comes in the front door screaming for a manager. I go and knock on the office door. Karen appears looking pissed and annoyed. She tries to snap at me, but I tell her she has a customer at the front asking for the manager. Karen rolls her eyes and heads towards the front, oblivious to the storm that is waiting. I went and found Jen huddled in the back, crying again. I tell her to get herself together and head back to the front when she's ready. I head to the line where the now purple-faced lady is screaming at Karen about dry cleaning and upholstery cleaning, and I want that girl fired. At this point, I can see that Karen has finally realized that things have gotten way out of control. She is trying to calm the lady down, but she is having none of it. Eventually, Jen comes back to the line and lady starts in on her again, calling her all kinds of nasty things. Karen just stood there and let the woman berate her. Jen just kinda deflated in front of us. Watching her crumble like that just broke something in me. I walked over to Jen and said, "Just quit. You're better than this job, and you can do better." She looked up at me for a moment, then smiled. She lifted her chin, walked to Karen and said, "I quit," handed her name tag to her and walked out. Karen started apologizing to the lady who now seemed slightly mollified. Then Karen started bad-mouthing Jen to her, saying how she was a terrible employee and how we were all happy she was gone. That's when I decided I was better than that job too. I looked at Karen and said, "The only terrible employee here is you." And I walked out. 2 other employees walked out right behind me. We all met with Jen in the parking lot and went to an IHOP where we sat and speculated on how Karen was getting along. Jen told me that was the first time in her life anyone had ever stood up for her. The next day, I got a call from the store manager asking for an explanation. Apparently, Karen had struggled the entire night with service. Afterwards, she had been there most of the night trying to clean and prep for day shift and had done a piss-poor job. The story she had given the store manager was that Jen and I had planned everything with the intent to set her up because we didn't like her and wanted to see her fail. Karen had basically blamed the whole incident on Jen and I. The store manager told me she was investigating to get all sides of the story. So I told her. A few hours later, she called again and informed me that Karen was no longer employed and asked if I would be coming in that night. I asked if Jen was getting her job back. She said no. The whole shake debacle wasn't something she could overlook. I said, then my answer is no. She was surprised. She tried to negotiate with me. I told her my price was Jen getting her job back. She said she couldn't do that, and that was that. If you're wondering how Jen turned out, I married her. We are very happy and have 4 children. TLDR. A new manager tries to change things to give herself an easy do-nothing job. When I tell her it will backfire, she tells me to go back to work. I do, and everything goes down in flames. She tries to blame me and gets fired anyway. Edit. Wow. Just wow. I wrote this while I was on break at work. Saw a few upvotes, then drove home. And now it's just gone crazy. I tried to thank as many people as I could, but I know I missed some. I showed it to my wife when I got home. I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She says it was one of her darkest days, but it ended up being one of the best of her life. This story is a wild ride of incompetent management and employees' frustration. A 17-year-old team leader at a fast food chain witnesses his new manager, Karen, implement changes that lead to chaos on her first night. Despite his warnings, Karen's incompetence causes a disastrous shift, ending with an employee quitting and Karen getting fired. The team leader also quits in solidarity and later marries the employee who was wrongly blamed for the chaos. Story from Suave Poncho. Please change your event graphic or we'll take legal action. We think you'll like this one more anyway. After discovering this sub, I recalled a story from a few months ago that I felt suited it. This will be long, I apologize. This past year was my final year in university, and I had the great pleasure of working as one of two co-editors for my university's satirical newspaper. As we all know, print media has been dying a slow and painful death, and unfortunately, our newspaper has not been immune to this. My co-editor and I believed that the best way to counter this was to host comedy-themed events throughout the academic year in order to get more name recognition and revenue for our paper. I came up with an event I am quite proud of. The idea was to host a satirical TED Talk-themed event. To give you some idea of what this entailed, when the event happened, I opened it by giving a 10-minute talk on how to lie to your friends about why you can't go out on Friday. I named the event TEDxXX and played on the TEDx slogan, "Ideas Worth Spreading," with our own slogan, "Worth Spreading." We picked a date, booked a venue, and created a graphic to advertise the event. Our graphic did look a bit familiar, but was also very obviously not a TEDx graphic. One important thing to keep in mind is that in Canada, where I live and where I studied, parody and satire are protected under copyright law as fair use. Soon after announcing our event, we received a Facebook message on our paper's Facebook page from some random person neither me nor my co-editor knew. They told us they were part of the TEDx club of our university, that they weren't happy with our event, that they wanted us to cancel it, etc., etc. We suggested they send us an email explaining that we would be happy to talk about it in a more professional setting rather than on Facebook. They were pretty uncompromising, and so we felt we needed to irk them somehow. We thought that being asked to act professional by a university-level satirical newspaper would do the trick. Rather than emailing us, the TEDx chapter decided to contact the club's manager of our school and lodge a very long series of complaints. Naturally, the club's manager contacted us asking for a meeting, and we complied. I think the club's manager was expecting us to be a couple of mean-spirited idiots, but we came there with the goal of making sure we were polite, respectful, and understanding, because we really wanted our event to happen. We needed the club's manager to see that we weren't breaking any rules or insulting anybody. The club's manager presented the complaints that this TEDx group had laid out. The short version is that in the eyes of the people running the official TEDx event at our university, our event was essentially being created to insult TED Talks, the people running them, and the people performing at them, all of whom were just students like us. Funnily, and by pure coincidence, the date we had picked to hold our event was also the date that the official TEDx club had planned to open registration for its own event. They assumed we were doing this to intentionally sabotage their event. Lastly, they told us our TEDxXX graphic was copying theirs and asked us to change the graphic. They were and are associated with the official TEDx conferences, and so they said we were committing copyright infringement. I've talked to a lot of people about our event since it happened. I've yet to speak to anyone outside of my school's TEDx club who had interpreted our event to be anything other than harmless fun. My co-editor and I both believed that the people running TEDx had built up this event to be some prestigious thing and had their egos bruised by our event. We wounded their pride, and they weren't happy. I think that sometimes in post-secondary schools where admission is difficult, and where, for the most part, everyone is surrounded by equally smart people who deserve to be there, people tend to cling to little things they do with fierce pride, like, for example, running a TEDx conference. So, when that gets parodied, it hurts for the people running it. I get that, but I think the degree to which they took offense was such an overreaction. I shouldn't even need to say it here. But obviously, our event had not been some grand attempt at insulting anybody performing in or planning the official TEDx conference. We were simply putting on a comedy show with a TED Talk theme. We explained as much to the club's manager. She was pretty level-headed, and I think she was surprised to see that we were being so reasonable. We explained to the club's manager that we had already booked our venue and advertised it for a specific night, and it would be so much less work for TEDx to change their registration date than for us to change the date of our actual event. We also explained that our event graphic had been designed by one of our paper's volunteers, and that our paper only met once a week. At the point when we met with the club's manager, Our event was only about a week away, and our paper's weekly meeting would only be a couple days before TEDx happened. We told her we could try and get the artist to make a new graphic, but that we couldn't do so for another few days, and that it might not be worth the effort. We also explained that since the artist was a volunteer, we couldn't obligate him to make a new graphic on such short notice. We could only ask. The club's manager was totally understanding and awesome about everything. She told us she was convinced and she wouldn't make us call off our event or change the date, though she said we should try to change the graphic if we could. She told us to just send an email to the TEDx directors telling them everything we had told her. She also asked us to make an announcement on our Facebook event explaining that we respected TEDx and all that. Here was our announcement on Facebook. To address any TEDxX concerns and questions, TEDxX is not in any way affiliated with any TEDx, school, or other TED Talk events. We are our own independent event, and our purpose is not to bring down or degrade other TED Talks on campus. We admire the work of students who are involved with TED Talks, and we think their event is one worthy of your time and attention. Our own event simply exists to fill a different niche and give students different performance opportunities, in comedy rather than rational thought. As an aside, I think that being forced to make such an obvious statement harmed TEDx way more than us. People immediately recognized what happened. One person even commented, "Holy, why are people so sensitive?" Nobody at the school had even thought there was a controversy before, but after we posted our statement, it made the people at TEDx seem like they were making a big deal out of nothing. Next, we emailed the TEDx directors. We sent them a long email, very politely explaining that we respect their event, and them, and everything else that you've already read. We weren't trying to sabotage them, etc. Not going to post that, it was way too long. They didn't actually respond to our email, so for most of the week we assumed that they had realized they overreacted and decided to just let us have our event in peace. What happened next was just so out of proportion. It was frankly mean. They got the official TEDx lawyers involved. Now, you have to understand that both of our clubs were just students trying to put on events for our respective student services. I honestly bore them no ill will, but they threatened us with lawyers. We were just a tiny little student newspaper putting on an event for 150 people a couple weeks before exam season. They were so offended by our event that they were prepared to have us sued by intellectual property lawyers. We got an email from the law firm 2 days before our TEDx event asking us to take down our graphic. My co-editor felt that we had not infringed on the TEDx copyright thanks to being protected under parody. I agreed, but was concerned that we probably couldn't outlawyer a law firm. After a bit of a panic and some righteous anger, we agreed that it would be easier and more fun to just maliciously comply. We did change our promotional event photo to 2 giant middle fingers. We sent them to the lawyers, letting them know we would agree to their demands in our infinite generosity. We announced on our Facebook page that we had changed our event graphic in the hopes that no other clubs considered branding using images of hands to be intellectual property. We flipped off everybody at our event and put up a giant projected image of 2 middle fingers for the entirety of the event, just to really own up to it. More drama ensued the day of, even involving someone from TEDx trying to spread rumors that our event had been moved to the Holiday Inn across town, LOL, and then that it had been cancelled outright. We put those rumors to rest and ended up having a profitable and successful night. In a night filled with jokes, our school's official TEDx club ended up being the biggest joke of all. TLDR. As an editor for my university's satirical newspaper, we put on a satirical version of a TED Talk conference and called it TED XXX. Following a lot of dumb drama, TEDx's official lawyers got involved and asked us to change our promotional graphic. So we changed it to 2 middle fingers and got the last word. Edit 2. Yes, I get it. My editing skills are not infallible. I should point out this is Reddit, not an article for my newspaper. Still, I should make it clear that being an editor for my student newspaper was about more than just editing grammar mistakes. The most important part of the job was encouraging my writers, helping them find their comedic voice, and generally helping them have fun and find a way to turn their venting into something funny and positive. Supporting other people in a positive way is something a few of you clearly haven't learned. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed. Instead of backing down, OP embraced the situation using humor to diffuse the tension. The response was clever, bold, and unapologetic, turning the tables on TEDx and making the lawyers look ridiculous. Perfect. Story from r/anti-work. Company wouldn't honor the agreed upon days off when hiring me, with medical documentation. I quit and cost them their quarterly bonuses and a $350,000 contract. TLDR. Bosses wouldn't honor the days off they agreed to. I quit, and there was nobody in the company who could easily replace me, causing a domino effect that cost them a lot of money and other employees. Longer story. I've spent the last few years working in fabrication, running some very specialized machines, industrial laser cutters for sheet metal. I'm very good at my job and have worked my way up to a fairly good hourly wage. I started working for this new employer in the fall last year. They specialize in HVAC ducting with an insanely quick turnaround time, and when I applied with my previous experience, they were excited to have me. For background, I have a medical condition that requires weekly appointments and follow-ups. I got into a treatment program I fought for months to get into, and it has been a lifesaver for me. I was 100% upfront about this with my new employer, stating that I absolutely needed Fridays off for medical appointments, but they could run me ragged through the week as long as I got that day off consistently. I provided documentation from my doctor backing this up. They agreed, and I worked an evening shift starting Sunday and ending Thursday morning, anywhere from 50 to 55 hours a week. This worked fine for a few months until the company started an expansion in its business and started taking on way more than they were able to comfortably accommodate. They were hiring people for my shift left and right, but could never seem to retain anyone after 2 months or so, because the work-life balance was non-existent. I remember one welder, a good hard worker, coming up to me as he was quitting, because in his words, "I've seen my kids a total of 15 minutes in the last 2 weeks." At the 6-month mark of my tenure there, I was the most senior employee on my shift, except the supervisor. The turnover rate was so high, there was no point to put in the effort to learn someone's name before they were gone. Throughout all this expansion, they never hired another laser operator. The machine was essentially running 24/7 between myself and 2 other people, and it was the most important machine in our workflow, because nothing else got done unless those parts were cut out. At the beginning of the year, they wanted to move me to a traditional Monday-Friday shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I refused because I wouldn't be able to continue with my medical program, nor get anything else done during the week. Around the middle of spring, they got backed up because one of the machines went down. I was asked if I could make an exception to my day off and come in on Friday. Pretty please. Me, being an idiot, I agreed to it and cancelled my appointment that week, thinking it would be a one-off because the machine was only down for a day. Legitimately happens. Once I made an exception the first time, you can see where this is going. A few weeks later, they asked me to do it again, not because the machine went down, but because they had just overextended themselves on a really expensive contract with a very big company. I objected, stating my medical exemption, and they pulled someone else in to work the shift. This happened a few times, and I did end up rearranging a few appointments because, again, I was an idiot. Things came to a head at the end of spring. The shift as a whole had a meeting that week and decided they wanted to put it to a vote to take that Sunday off and work on Friday instead for the week. I was outvoted, wanting to work the original shift, and it was suddenly decided that everyone would be coming in Friday. The next day, a Monday, I go in and talk to HR and make them aware that this is a recurring issue. The HR manager says he'll handle it and get back to me the next day. I talk to my doctor and let him know there's a chance I'll need to reschedule again. I get a phone call from the medical office stating that I've ended up rescheduling or cancelling a lot in the past few months, and if it kept happening, I was at risk of getting dropped from the program. I cannot and will not allow that to happen. I go in the next day and talk to HR, letting them know that I was promised this wasn't going to be an issue. I reminded them they agreed to my scheduling and I had provided them documentation that I could not work on Fridays. HR calls in my supervisor. For context, my supervisor was one of those people who don't really see value in anything but work. He got married last year and he took no time off for his wedding. He worked a full shift on Friday, got married Saturday, and was back at work on Sunday morning. He expects everyone underneath him to adhere to this insanity disguised as work ethic and is one of the reasons our turnover was so high. What follows is a heated argument about how he needs me to work that shift, and he won't even try to call in someone else. I tell them I'll come in on Saturday. That won't work. I tell them I'll do 4 14-hour shifts that week to make up the production, as this company has absolutely no qualms with handing out overtime to anyone who wants it. That won't work either. Supervisor stands firm. HR looks at me and shrugs, telling me there's nothing he can do. I'm pissed at this point and go to work my shift, updating my resume and seeing what other jobs are available in my field, and there's a lot. The plan was to get a new job and turn in notice, but then the supervisor comes up to me and tries to be buddy-buddy. He starts a long-winded yarn about how sometimes we have to sacrifice for work, and that there are things expected of us as adults in a functioning society, and then tells me, "You need to make a decision." I have heard that phrase a handful of times in my life, and nobody who ever says it to me does so out of concern. It's always a, "You need to decide to do what I'm telling you to do, of your own free will." I grunt and say, "Yeah, I guess I do." Asshole then slaps me on the back, smiles, and says, "Great, see you Friday." That was the breaking point for me. I did work the rest of my shift, but at the end of the night I drafted up a resignation letter effective immediately, left it on HR's desk, and walked out. Went home, put my phone on silent, and slept like the dead. I'm almost 40, and that's the first time in my life I've ever quit a job on the spot. I had 4 missed calls from my company the next morning, 2 from HR, 1 from the boss of the company, and 1 from my now ex-supervisor. Never returned them. I did end up getting a new job at a company that respects my hours and has a much better work-life balance, and a raise in my salary to boot. 6 weeks had gone by, and I stopped in at the gas station that all of us would go to on break to grab a drink. I ran into one of the only co-workers that I liked, and he told me what happened. When I quit, they didn't have anyone else on my shift who knew how to run and operate the machine. They started leaning on the other 2 people, causing one of them to quit. And on top of that, half a dozen welders and other fabricators quit as well in a domino effect. The entire production completely backed up because of this, and that big client that I mentioned earlier, they're named after a particular rainforest in South America and were building a bunch of new distribution centers in the area. Our company landed the contract to do their HVAC work on several, with a possibility of extending it outward to more depending on how the initial partnership went, and it went poorly. They missed the target date for the production run, and the penalties for doing so ate up any profit they were going to get from the job that they underbid, along with causing Rainforest Company to cancel the contract after the initial work. Nobody got bonuses that quarter, causing even more people to quit. The company has several locations across the US. In one quarter, they went from having the highest profit numbers to being dead last. I can't even imagine the that the C-suite execs threw at my old boss and HR supervisor over that happening. Now, when I look at their company page on Indeed, they're desperately looking for people, but the salary ranges are down about 20% from when I applied, when things were good. All I wanted was for them to honor the one day off I needed, and they agreed to. This story is a testament to the importance of advocating for oneself and one's needs in the workplace. The OP, a skilled fabrication worker, was hired with the understanding that they would have Fridays off for medical appointments. However, as time went on, the company repeatedly tried to renege on this agreement, leading to a heated confrontation and ultimately the OP's resignation. The employee quit, triggering a domino effect that resulted in the loss of several other employees and a significant financial blow to the company, including the loss of a $350,000 contract and quarterly bonuses. Story is from Sincere Ferret. Gotcha. I used to work in a school as a support educator in a high school scenario, and I got to know a lot of my students quite well. They all very much looked forward to me being in their classrooms, which was a nice, warm and fuzzy feeling because it meant I was doing my job and I was doing it well. One day, midweek, the school was severely short-staffed and the powers that be were having to step in and cover classrooms themselves due to the catastrophic staff shortage. As an education support employee, I was not allowed to be in a classroom on my own with any students because I was not a fully qualified teacher. In the event I got to a classroom and there was no teacher present, I was not allowed to unlock the classroom and let the students in order to keep them safe and together and to ensure we did not disrupt the classrooms around the area. This made my due diligence in performing my child protection duties very difficult in circumstance like this. I had a duty of care to the students, but I also had to adhere to the policy of not being alone in a classroom with students without a fully qualified teacher present. I arrived to a class where the powers that be forgot to roster on a sub-teacher. Knowing the policies of the school and still within the realm of my duty of care to the students, I spoke to the senior class about what had happened. I asked them to please be respectful of the classrooms around us, and if they could work with me while I found out who would be coming to essentially babysit us all, was the way I put it. The students were awesome and just sat down, got their current workout from other classes, grouped together, and got to it. I rang the contact line I was instructed to ring. If this ever did happen, and they said they would send someone straight up, I went and notified the teachers either side of us what was happening, so they knew we weren't just a bunch of unruly delinquents hanging out where we shouldn't be, so no complaints could be made against me. We waited 10 minutes and no one turned up. I rang again. I was told the same thing, and we waited patiently and quietly again. One of the teachers came out to see what was happening, I informed them. No one had turned up, and I had contacted the office a second time and informed the teacher that the office had advised they were sending someone straight up. The teacher did the old skitisk at me, returned to their classroom, and shut the door to block us out. The lesson time was 40 minutes long. By this point, we were 25 minutes into the lesson period. The principal normally does the rounds throughout the high school a couple times a week before the lunchtime let out, and he found us all working quietly and efficiently outside this classroom. He came up and started blasting the students as to why they weren't in class. I quickly stepped in and said, "Hi, sir, you must be our replacement teacher. I have rung the office twice and no one has been sent up to take the lesson." Now, the principal was widely known to be on the downhill ride into retirement, so for him to have to do this was a real inconvenience to him. So he begrudgingly unlocked the classroom door, let us all in, and proceeded to babysit us into the lunch break. Once everyone was released to lunch, I was asked to accompany him to his office to have a word. My line manager was summoned, and I coped a nice big ton of talking to for my actions. I was confused as to why I was getting reamed for the way I handled things because I followed the conflicting policies to the letter. I then asked for clarification and brought up all the written instructions and policies of the school to get the principal to explain to me where I had gone wrong. He couldn't fault what I had done, but because his senior staff had cocked up and not assigned a sub to the class I was with, he had to step in and help out. And because I had been there to instigate that he take responsibility, being the principal of the school and the only qualified teacher in the vicinity, he had a beef with me about that. I requested that the principal and my line manager send me an email with the attached policies highlighting what I should do in the future, and I would ensure it never happened again. They both seemed happy with that, sent me what I had already pulled up for clarification, but this time their names were attached to it. My principal included a step-by-step layout of what was expected of me, even though I did exactly that to the letter anyway. But this time, I had it in writing. I printed it off, laminated it, and carried it with me at all times, plus saved the email just in case. A few of the other support workers learnt through the gossip channel what I had gone through, and I advised that they also ask for what I had in writing so they knew and couldn't be screwed. I wasn't going to send it to them, as we all know how that pans out, and it's best to have it directly from the horse's mouth. Cue malicious compliance. Over the coming weeks, the staff shortage was still an issue, and my scenario occurred to 4 of my other support staff friends over various classes and on various days. Each time, one of them experienced no teacher turning up to take the class. They followed the step-by-step protocol set out by the principal to the letter. The final instruction on his email was, if you get to the 20-minute mark of a lesson and no one has turned up, even though you have contacted staff support, please send me an email immediately to document the occurrence so we can monitor how often this happens, and then follow up with phone call to inform me you are on your own outside the classroom with the students so I can come and help or find someone to help. The principal was called out to 9 different lessons in the space of 3 days to take classes that sub-teachers had not been supplied to. On the Friday of that week, all support staff were dragged in for a meeting during break. I knew what was coming, so I walked in with my laminated copies of the emails I originally asked for, plus my employment agreement, fair work documents, child protection laws, and training documents and laws surrounding lunch breaks. We all got absolutely blasted for the amount of times we had contacted the principal in the past week for help with classrooms not covered by full qualified teachers. We all just sat there and coped it, and then we were asked if we had anything to say for ourselves. Of course, the principal's management team was not under fire for their blunders, as this all came from their mismanagement and not doing their jobs properly. I stood up, phoned the support line for employees. With the union rep, got someone on a loudspeaker. I knew the conversation would be recorded at the union's end, and I authorized it to be recorded as I wanted the whole glorious thing captured so no recourse could happen to any of us. I explained what the situation was and invited the principal to chime in at any time to provide his facts on the matter. I provided the proof of the principal's email. I provided my employment contract, which was the same for all people in my position, that stated hours to work and therefore breaks to be had. I provided the child protection laws and policies of the school. I stated we had complied with them and exercised our due diligence in the spirit of managing the situations in the spur of the moment, and all the other support workers agreed we had. I provided the child protection training documents we are forced to do at the start of every single year. It's mandatory, and we cannot work in a classroom without having completed it, even though once it's done most staff ignore it. I also said that we had progressed 38 minutes into our 40-minute break and would now all be required to take that break or be paid overtime at double overtime rates, as it had been so many hours since our last break, which invites additional penalty rates. The union asked the principal to make a statement, which he did, and then we ended the call. The principal, upper management of the school, and my manager were all left absolutely stunned. We had managed to single-handedly get on record that the school was remiss in child protection. Upper management were not doing their jobs in rostering staff onto cover classes. Staff abuse for following all policies and procedures to the letter, and to top it all off, the school had to give us all our lunch breaks in the afternoon, which ended up being the rest of the day because the meeting went well over break time. So in good faith, we all got to leave early on the Friday afternoon, get paid for it along with our overtime rates, and we all went on strike the following Wednesday when we all knew no exams were on, and our absence would not affect our students, just to send a message to management that this whole thing was on their heads. Our absence was felt, but since we were not supposed to look after students without a fully qualified teacher around, they ended up having multiple classes with no supervision whatsoever on the Wednesday because all us support workers were not there to wrangle the masses. This caused more management to be exposed for not doing their jobs. The following school term, management got shuffled around and relocated to try get things back on track. If you don't home educate your kids, I suggest you do. This is a more common occurrence than most people think. This story is a wildly entertaining and relatable tale of a support educator's experience in a high school. The OP's clever use of malicious compliance to expose the school's mismanagement and hypocrisy is a joy to behold. Then it leads to the absurdity of bureaucratic red tape and the importance of holding those in power accountable. The OP's determination to follow the school's policies to the letter is a masterclass. The story's outcome is satisfying, with the principal and upper management being held accountable for their mistakes. Story from FM Lit's SML. Angry director gets her comeuppance in 4 gradual actions. TLDR at the bottom. It's a long read, might be boring, but it's been nice typing this out. Several years ago, I used to work at an agency that hired us out as short-term temporary workers, as contractors. These jobs pretty much consisted of stuff that company employees couldn't be bothered to do, and so got someone in to sort out. It wasn't great, but I had to make ends meet. Anyway, one of these jobs was for 150 hours at 5 weeks of office administration. There wasn't much more information to go on, but a job's a job. The office turned out to be quite a small, stuffy little building at the back of an industrial estate. I was told to report to Beryl. When I turned up, I was met by a rather grumpy-looking old lady having a cigarette by the front door. This was Beryl. Beryl didn't even say hello or ask me my name, but showed me in, pointed at an enormous pile of boxes full of paperwork, saying, "This all needs to be scanned in. There are 2 scanners connected to a computer there. Off you go. Let someone know if you need help." So, off I went. Fort Kick-Ass that pile of boxes was to be my job for the next month and a bit. Joy. The office was predominantly young men, with Beryl being the only other woman. She was in her 50s and spent more time smoking than working, and without being rude, clearly didn't look after herself. It was quite flattering to have a bunch of these guys pop by my workstation for a chat occasionally. After a few days of scanning, Beryl visited my cubicle. She wasn't happy that I spent too much time talking and not enough time working. I was confused. While I didn't have any metrics or targets, I was pretty consistently working through this mountain of paperwork. I got the impression that Beryl didn't like the attention I was getting. I pointed out to her that I haven't left my desk apart from to go to the toilet. If someone's over here to talk to me, then that's fine, as I can talk and scan at the same time, like I'm doing right now. She wasn't happy and turned away, calling out, "Just do your job," as she left. Some of the other guys had heard this and they popped by my desk later and said not to worry. They'd had agency staff before, and Beryl always hated it if a young woman arrived because she was grumpy and jealous. Not my words. In fact, a few years ago, one young woman had left the office in tears because Beryl had tore her a new one for going for lunch with some of the other guys. Naturally, this annoyed me, particularly because Beryl thought she could bully, disrespect agency staff, and I certainly wasn't going to leave the job because of an angry bitch. Malicious Compliance number 1. For the rest of my time there, I made sure to get dressed up. Makeup, curls, a midi office dress, stiletto heels. When Beryl saw me clicking my way down the office the next day, fully dressed up just to scan some paperwork, she scowled at me, but didn't say anything. The next week, Beryl took some time out of her busy smoking schedule to visit me in my cubicle, the second time she'd done so since I'd started. Some of the paperwork I was scanning in had been stapled together, so I'd asked someone in the office for a staple remover and a stapler. I used to pull out the staple, scan the document, rename it on the computer, then restaple it and put it back in the box. I was just pulling a staple out when Beryl walked by. Beryl's first words to me were, "What are you doing?" I replied that this document was stapled, and if I put it in the machine, it'd jam. She raised her voice slightly and said, "Nobody told you to do that. Just scan each page in separately. Leave the papers alone." I could almost hear her eye roll as she walked away. Malicious Compliance number 2. So I did. Scanned everything with staples just folded over, and then created folders called Document 1, 2, 3, and each scan went in as 123 page 1.pdf, 123 page 2.pdf. You get the idea. This slowed me down a lot, but hey, it's what I was asked to do. At some point, Beryl walked by and saw me flipping pages like that. I'd put my hair in a bun and taken my heels off, and she smirked. She thought she'd flustered me and that I didn't see her reaction. Don't worry, Beryl, you didn't, and I did. The paperwork I was scanning in was boxed up as newest first, so as I got to some of the older papers, these had been moved around a couple of times and were slightly scrunched up or folded or similar. A jammed scanner wasn't an issue, it had happened a handful of times before, but as I got to the older papers, the jams became more frequent. It was easy to sort though. Just open the back door of the scanner, roll the paper out, cancel the job, and redo it. At this point, I'd gone back to unstopping and restapling because Beryl had given me some space thinking she'd broken me, and I just wanted to get the job done so I could leave. Beryl walked in one day. This would have been my fourth week there. She saw me unjamming the scanner and flipped her top. She yelled, "SML, what are you doing?" At this point, all heads in the office turned to where we were. I calmly told her, "The scanner's jammed. I'm just pulling the paper out so I can rescan it. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes." She continued yelling, "At no point were you instructed to perform at repairs. We have someone for that. Stop what you are doing and get someone to help you. I asked you this when you started. Why can't you follow simple instructions?" It took a lot of patience not to argue back with her, which I thought was what she wanted, but I said, "Okay, fine. Can I speak to the IT guy to sort this out?" I couldn't have choreographed her response better. I then knew that she did want me to argue so she could kick me out because she hesitated and said, um, well, the IT guy is off for the rest of the week. This was a Thursday. Use the other scanner. If you jam it, let me know." And stormed off. Malicious compliance number 3. I knew her diary and knew she was off the next day, Friday. I carried on with the one scanner, making sure it didn't jam that day, and waited until the next morning. Coincidentally, the scanner jammed on the first piece of paper I fed into it. Who'd have thought? Obviously, I rang Beryl. She didn't answer her phone, and as she wasn't in the office, I spent the day sat around without much to do. Whilst talking to the guys in the office, I learned that the company had been bought by a much larger IT firm, and they just wanted the rights to the proprietary software that they had developed. It also turned out that the CEO of the small company basically paid himself into retirement and appointed Beryl as the director. Beryl knew that her days were numbered, so she was even more bitter to the staff. The guys working there had been committed various levels of careers within the new IT firm, which they were happy with. As I was told, 120,000 employees, 30 dev roles are easy to find, one director role is not. Anyway, when we returned, on Monday, you could almost see the vein in her neck throbbing. She'd wasted an entire day of whatever her company paid my agency because little old me wasn't trusted to fix a paper jam. I used to get in a little later than the rest of the staff. Agency perks woo. But when I got in, she'd had the IT champion perform the skilled job of opening a scanner and pulling a piece of paper out. She didn't even look at me when she said, "Scanners are fixed, get on with your job and don't mess around." At this point, you may be thinking, "SML, this is a lot of text for some pretty trivial MC." Well, you'll like the final part. My last week there coincided with a new contract that the company had been given by their new owners. I assume it was some sort of litmus test. Whilst I don't pretend to understand what it was, the job involved a lot of scanning documents that had been handwritten. Hooray! More boxes. At the same time, a few of the guys who worked there were going on a visit to the new parent company, which were based in the USA. I live in the UK. The IT champion was one of these guys who went. When the boxes were delivered to my cubicle, Beryl popped by and said, "These take priority. All of what I said to you is more important than ever. Do not mess around, otherwise you're out of the door. Am I clear?" "Yes, ma'am." The paperwork delivered was from the USA. Our paper sizes are different. The first piece of paper I fed into the scanner jammed it, a safety lock, because it expected A4 and got US letter instead. I jammed both scanners. Beryl, not being one to turn down a free trip to America, had gone with them. I rang her at 11 a.m. UK time, which was 5 a.m. their time. She picked up and was not impressed. I felt sorry for the folks adjacent to her hotel room when she screamed down the phone, "You've done what? How? Why?" I tell her about the USA paperwork. Can you not fix it? Final malicious compliance. No, you've told me many times that I can't fix these machines. What's the business continuity plan? Side note, my brother told me that phrase and he still doesn't quite understand why I turned up to his house a bit later with a few pizzas and a box of beer. Beryl had no idea what to do. She was clearly flustered. Can you just do what you can? We need this done. What would you want me to do? Can you fix the scanners because this is really important? I'm sorry, you told me I can't do that. I need simple instructions to work with. Just fix it. I'd be happy to show an IT specialist where the scanners are if you can get them here to hang up tone. Well, that's that then. I spent the rest of the week chatting to my colleagues, updating my CV, and applying for jobs. Nobody turned up to fix the scanners. When my final week finished, I said bye to the guys I'd worked with, wished them luck, and left with none of the critical paperwork scanned in. When Beryl got back from her business trip, I learned that she'd spent one day at the parent company and left it to the other guys. When the shit hit the fan because nothing was being delivered, they wondered where she was. This was day 2 into the 5-day business trip. She was at a spa, phone switched off. She flew out early on day 5, without seeing any of her colleagues or the parent company. I kept in touch with a few of the guys afterwards. After this, the dev guys were transferred contracts to the larger IT firm. They all got a very small salary increase, but were also able to work from home. This was pre-COVID, so was a bit of a rarity back then. Beryl, meanwhile, didn't fare so well. She was initially offered redundancy, paid, including pension deals, but when someone complained that she'd not been present for the meetings, which I think was their IT champion, they found out she'd been sightseeing, shopping, tanning, and getting her hair done on company time. She ended up being fired. No bonus, no pension, nothing. I quit the agency not long afterwards and after 1 or 2 moves, ended up in a job I'm very happy with. The agency was none the wiser about any of this. They just wanted their money and aside from one initial checkup call, left me to it. TLDR. Angry employee doesn't like agency worker, nitpicks and creates issues. Agency worker works to rule and causes a fracas. Angry employee thinks a business trip is a holiday and doesn't respond to messages. Angry employee gets fired. The malicious compliance was perfect and was executed flawlessly. Each action was a calculated response to Beryl's micromanagement, leading to her frustration and eventual downfall. OP turned her petty control into her own undoing, demonstrating a masterful use of patience and strategy. The story from ancient_educator_76. Empty your pockets or I'm calling the police. Let's empty your store instead. Pre-TL, DR. I'm super pissed about what just happened to me for multiple reasons, so I apologize for my lack of candor, concern, or how this shut tea comes across. Not mobile, just literally trembling right now. All names have been changed to protect my sanity. So this just happened on my lunch break, as I drove to the other side of town to cash in my scratcher. By other side of town, I mean across the invisible border that separates areas that can sell scratchers and areas that can't. Tribal grounds don't sell scratchers or lottery at convenience stores. I drove to this place because I wanted a soda and some snacks, a healthy lunch for a teacher, and usually don't go here unless I need lottery. It's a cool-looking little mom-and-pop place, but the second I stepped in, the cashier just gave me an icy stare for some reason. Little background. I have 3 of my 5 children on the autism Asperger's spectrum, and though I myself was never diagnosed as a child, I can guarantee that I have similar tendencies, and I have a feeling that my lack of proper eye contact might have something to do with the cashier's high noon stare, a realization that came to me the second I typed it, now, greater than. As I was walking into the place, I contemplated cashing the scratcher, $5 yay, right away, but decided I'd wait until I get my stuff and then cash it at the same time. In this indecisiveness, I found myself fumbling around in my pockets and feeling to make sure I had my car keys. A nervous habit that I have, I probably check once every 15 minutes, whether I'm in at home, on the road, or sometimes even sleeping. I can't tell you how many times I checked my pockets, but I can tell you that someone staring at me increases the frequency. I picked my items mentally, but yet again checked my pockets to see if I had enough change plus the $5 to pay for the items. It felt like I had enough, and I want to use this as a math problem for my students. If I had 17 coins, only dimes and quarters, and it was a total of $3.05, how many of each coin did I have? As I return even, I'm deep in thought about this problem when I hear yelling or something that sounds like blah blah police. Love you like a father, John Mulaney. I look up and see a lady right in my face. Oh, I'd be horrible in a bank robbery, presumably repeating herself, saying, "Empty your pockets or I'm calling the police." She didn't have generalized pronunciation issues, but she for some reason super-emphasized the end syllable. Just don't know how to properly depict that. It was borderline funny, and I kind of laughed as I started to comply simultaneously with the moment she took her gnarly little smoky fingers and dug her nails into my arm. She had to reach up. I'm 6'3". She's not. I like to consider my pain threshold pretty good, but this chick was seriously hurting me, trying to drag me to someplace. I just went along with her, told her, "Calm the down here," as I pulled super sharply away from her increasingly painful grasp. She yelled at me again, "Empty your pockets," and then to some empty air, "Call the police." Time for malicious compliance as quick as I can manage. I took this moment to think to myself, oh, I better empty my damn pockets right now before this gets out of hand. It was already way out of hand. It just took me a beat to realize. I quickly started emptying my pockets, which had 32 pieces of a ripped-up scratcher, 3 receipts, 2 of which showed me my hours at Mendy's, 1 was to a car wash or something, my wallet, a straw wrapper, and with everything I took out of my pockets, I smacked it on her checkout area individually, saying, "See? This isn't your shut, this isn't your shut, this, oh wait, no, it's also not your shut." And when I got through almost everything, I skipped a few with the scratcher pieces, and finally ended with the scratcher I was going to cash in there. I realized that I was acting out of anger and physical pain, and should probably take it down a notch. I took this opportunity to thoroughly enjoy the dastardly malice inherent in placing an assortment of ripped-up papers upon a counter. Her entire counter was covered in absolute garbage, mixed with about 5% of the surface area, representing stuff I need. I'm a chipmunk, what can I say? Now she's got a mess to clean up. But that's just the beginning. I then started emptying my shirt pocket, which had my teacher ID, my pens, my whiteboard marker. Yes, I keep all this in my shirt pocket, and yes, I wear a button-up chap's shirt over my jeans. I then put my arms spread out as if to say, "Would you like to check anywhere else? I'm clean." She just kept shaking her head at me, shaking her head to someone off in the distance, and then the cops roll up. I can't believe she actually called. Had someone call? The police. As the car pulled up, I just couldn't explain to you how glorious this was, because the lady and I both had satisfying grins on our collective faces. Her because she thought I was done for, and subsequently told me, "Now we'll really search you." Component placement and me because it's none other than my school's SRO, resource officer, who just so happened to get the call somehow. I was bleeding through my shirt, and I could feel it. I don't know how this was even scientifically possible, and if I read someone write this, I wouldn't believe it, but swear to God she broke the skin through my polo shirt. What in the actual? Anyway, Officer Gold walks in, and I was about to let on that I knew him by addressing him by name. Thank God I didn't because not a good look. But he beat me to the punch by saying, "Davis, you holding up another liquor store?" With that dopey S smile he always has. I told him, "Hey, I emptied my pockets. You're willing to search me just—" Officer Gold. "Rich that won't be necessary. I can see your pockets are empty. Did she watch you empty them? Is there a camera?" He just continued rattling off his cop spiel, the sun beaming through his glasses from the opposite side, offering a ray of hope. Then turning to the lady, "Ma'am, can I ask you a few questions?" at which time he returned to me, about to tell me something when he sees my arm and says, "How the hell did that happen?" I thought, yeah, you might want to check the camera on that one too, but just looked directly at the lady to indicate the answer we both already knew. He then turned to the lady and told her to follow him. Had her perp walked to the outside of the store, when immediately a kid came running out to her defense with a steady stream of energy drinks clumsily clunking behind, and Gold turned toward him and had him sit down next to his mom on the curb outside. By this time, a second police car had arrived at the scene, had an exchange with Officer Gold, and Gold spoke with the mom while the new officer came to talk with me. She asked me the typical questions like when I got there, whether I'd been there earlier in the day, I hadn't, if I knew her or the son before today, etc. I guess thinking about it wasn't exactly a streamlined series of questions, but whatever. The truth is like a priceless gem surrounded by muddy. For those wanting another example, truth floats in a sea of lies. She asked me if I wanted to press charges against Rosie the Riveter. Seriously, I'm still throbbing right now from this woman's G.I. Joe kung fu grip, and despite the feeling of pain still throbbing through, all the while pumping my blood to my increasingly annoying headache, I simply told her, "Oh, that's not necessary, so long as she knows that I'm not a thief." I wish I could have seen the face on Rosie when she realized she was the one about to go to jail instead of me, but I did get to see her sitting in the back of the squad car. I could describe a woman who was repeatedly shaking her head in anger, flailing about. I could portray a cold, callous woman ready for her sentence to be served and to get it over with. I could tell you that she was a flood of tears flowing down as her 20-something son looks on from outside the car, barricaded by Officer Gold. But all of these depictions are painfully incorrect. It was so anticlimactic. She just sat there, no anger, no visible emotion whatsoever. She got released from her zip-tied wrists, grabbing a waiting piece of paper from Goldie, locking the store doors, and nonchalantly walking to her vehicle. While all of this was happening, Officer 2 had been asking me some more questions, almost trying to talk me into pressing charges, and handed me a victim's rights pamphlet. I guess in case I change my mind and want to turn this into a petty revenge story, TLDR. My shifty eyes, weird social tics and spectrum-adjacent OCDness gets me manhandled by a convenience store clerk who accused me of shoplifting, making me empty my pockets. I emptied her store instead. An AMP 200B. Let's see if this updates takes. My iPad wouldn't let me yesterday. As I said in the comments and was trying to post as an update, Officer Gold brought me paperwork, took pictures of my arm and hand. I didn't even notice my hand bruising until he said something. In my classroom, on my 7th hour prep. He even told me how to word things to not leave any question as to what happened. Very succinct and factual, and descriptive of the damage inflicted. I am so thankful to work in this community and to have such a great and supportive SRO and school community. Thank you, Goldie. The malicious compliance was absolutely perfect and satisfying. OP dramatically emptied his pockets, turning the false accusation into an embarrassing mess for the aggressive cashier. Adding insult to injury, karma struck when the cops sided against the cashier. Story from Lunch Lady 55... If you think you can find another job in this economy, go ahead and try. Challenge accepted. I've read a lot of people having issues with jobs, with everything that's going on, and it reminds me of an act of malicious compliance that I perpetrated back in the last economic crisis of 08 to 09. I worked for a large online website in what we call the Operations Center. Large websites have many servers, not only in number but in type. A problem is sometimes simple, like this server, really just a computer, is broken. But sometimes it's complicated. A dozen small problems have happened throughout the system, normally not an issue on their own, but together have become this perfect storm that the whole website and takes it down. These problems are complicated, and often the individual developers are not familiar enough with the system as a whole to figure it out quickly. This is where the Operations Center is tasked with monitoring the system as a whole and connecting the dots on these larger problems. Different companies may use many names like Service Operations Center SOC, Network Operations Center NOC, etc. But every large website has this sort of group that acts as the custodian of the interdependent connections of the individual servers. It can take a year to a year and a half of learning how a website works before you're even useful during an outage, and many years before you're an expert and have the confidence to lead a shift. We ran 24/7, 365, all from one office in a major city. One half the people were on 4 10-hour shifts, others were on 3 to 12.5-hour shifts, with 5 extra hours every other week to make 80 hours every 2 weeks, covering the whole week with no on-call, as we were staffed 24/7 by 365. No need to call anyone at home, there was always someone at the office. I had been there for years and was damn good at my job. I had done several years on third shift and was ready to be done with staying up all night and basically being a zombie on my time off. It's tough to switch from being awake all night to being awake all day twice a week. So a new manager, let's call him Kyle, was hired and decided that he didn't like the fact we were only getting on sleep. He wanted to us just a little harder and dry. So he pulls me into a meeting room one evening when basically everyone except my 2 team members had gone home, slides this paper over to me, and starts telling me that the shifts have to be changed, and everyone has to work 5 days a week. And on top of that, now shift leaders have to be on call during the time period of their shift on their days off. Something about understanding common issues that happen during that time of day. On top of this, they were going to expect us to also do some kind of vaguely defined project work while we were on shift or something, which, with our workload, was absolutely ridiculous to expect. We weren't JS or Java developers anyway, which was what the site ran on, so it was asinine to expect us to work on the web application in our spare time. We were ops, and while some of us were good at scripting, this was just a terrible decision. There were already teams there that handled monitoring and build tooling for us to use. The turd cherry on top of this sandwich was that he was moving me back to third shift, and I'd be working Wednesday, Sunday, no weekend, and on call at night during my 2 days off. After all this was laid out to me, I looked at him and said, we'd be working every day of the year, no time to unplug or get away from work. I don't know why anyone would accept this plan as it's laid out. He responded with a smug grin on his face that I will never forget. Well, if you think you can find another job in this economy, you're welcome to try. I literally, not literally as figuratively, but actually literally, had to bite my tongue hard enough to bleed to stop myself from saying "challenge accepted" out loud. Instead, I slid the paper back at him and walked out of the meeting room without another word. The thing is that good sysadmins are tough to hire. We're loyal, we have excellent problem-solving skills, and we enjoy a challenge. So I kept my mouth shut, started working overnights, and meanwhile contacted everyone I knew about the predicament I was in. I got Kyle to pay for a certification that I'd always wanted. And meanwhile, I was complying with all the maliciousness I could come up with. I landed an interview with someone who'd managed our group right when I'd been hired. I showed them how I'd kept growing as a professional, getting certifications and regular promotions. I let slip that the only 2 days I'd be available for the interview were Mondays and Tuesdays because, well, they'd changed the schedule, and I'd have to keep my phone on as I'd be on call those 2 days. This led them to ask more questions about the changes there, and I have to admit, I wasn't at all averse to telling them how this new manager was changing things. I could absolutely see the disbelief on their face and enjoyed every, "What? That's not how you run things." This old manager was sympathetic, and so I had another job offer in hand within a month of the changes. I left a 2-week notice on Kyle's desk that said, "Despite the slightly stagnant economy, I have been offered another position. Effective in 2 weeks, I will no longer be able to continue my employment with company." The little told me not to come back after 1 week. Didn't even try to schedule any knowledge transfer meetings where we share what we know when we leave, a common thing with technical employees. Cut off your nose to spite your face, I guess. Now he didn't have anyone to cover for that third shift with any experience for months. Mistakes were made. Website problems were way up on his watch, which was tracked by another team. He had no one else to blame but himself. He did tell me I was welcome to try. Epilogue. I was always getting stories from the people who were left about dumb that he said in large meetings, but eventually he crossed HR. He said something mildly inappropriate in a meeting, and someone went to HR and complained. He then went all in on his stupidity and, you not hear, God's honest truth, pulled that person into a meeting room alone and demanded to know why they went to HR. He told them stuff like, "You come to me first if you have a problem with me," and "We don't go above other people's heads around here." The person was shaken, and the other people in the operations center advised that they go straight back to HR with it. HR wasn't ready to believe it and clandestinely called others to corroborate. Not only did they say it was totally true, but they all felt free to discuss even more inappropriate behavior they'd seen. Kyle was escorted out with nothing but a box of his belongings that day. Do not pass go. Do not collect unemployment. I don't know what happened to Kyle after that, but that was a bridge I was happy to burn and dance and sing while it crumbled to ashes. And don't give up hope. This too shall pass. Businesses know this and will still be hiring for the long term. It will be tough, but you can do this. Do it. Interview, on video conferences of course. Talk to old co-workers and managers. There are opportunities even in times of crisis. Look for them. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. TL, Dieter. Manager f***ed everyone during 08 to 09 financial crisis and says, "If you think you can get a job in this economy, you're welcome to try." I try. I do. I quit. You're so obsessed with how I dress that you're going to involve HR? All right, let's get a supervisor involved and see how that goes for you. The malicious compliance was masterclass, executed perfectly. OP played the long game, leveraged company resources for certifications, found a better job, and left Kyle to crash and burn. The HR downfall was poetic justice. Story from Catfish 21, SEM. Malicious compliance costs company hundreds of millions and their most profitable product. So this is a story from someone I know. I've known this person for years, and while I don't work with them, I've seen this story play out more or less step by step. I know several people involved, but I'm going to tell it from the point of view of the person I know the best. So many years ago, this person, let's just refer to them as person got a really great job working for a Fortune 500 company. Not going to give any more specifics, but the company offered many benefits for their employees. They treated their employees like people and not like numbers. They offered a yearly raise to anyone who worked there. This was meant to do several things. First of all, it was meant to keep up with inflation so that employees wouldn't have to stress about money. I'm sure a lot of you know the struggle, waiting for minimum wage to be updated so you can start saving money to hold over till the next wage increase. No, the company was ahead of the curve. On top of that, when they did start hiring new employees for more, they increased the wage of anyone with that specific position by the same amount to keep older employees from earning less than newer employees. They offered many other benefits as well. Basically, an awesome place to work for. Unfortunately, it's a small town, and the company wanted to expand that specific branch of operations. They couldn't do it here, so they chose to move out. They sold the branch office building along with the product that person worked to another smaller company. When it was sold, then person went with it, the old company made the new company sign a contract which guaranteed that the yearly bonus would stay around along with several other similar benefits. New company wasn't around very long and ended up expanding as well. They did the same thing, sold the location and product to another company. Unfortunately, they didn't care as much about their employees and only treated them well because of contractual obligations. So when they sold the location and product, it did not come with a contract. New company did care a little bit about employees, but ended raises and all of that. They would listen to employee complaints, but that was about it. They weren't around long either. before the scummiest company came in and bought them out. So a new company comes in and buys them out and immediately starts changing policies and shifting everything up to make everyone's jobs harder. Person and their team members got used to it and kept going. Now, here's the thing about Person. Person works on a team of specialists. There are only about 12 people on the team and a manager that's over them. Well, I'll get to that. This team doesn't require any special education or anything, but it does require a several-week training course and several months of acclimation. The product is extremely delicate, and the customers for this product are extremely demanding. They more or less require perfection, anything short and no money. You must watch every single word that you say to these customers, or they might write you off permanently. However, this is an extremely valuable product, and the company makes a lot of money from it. Or they did at least. Let's speed forward about 10 to 15 years. The company has only found new ways to treat their employees less like humans since they took over and are somehow getting away with it. Turnover is high, but as long as they have high school grads looking for a job, then they can keep their building full. Unfortunately, Person and their team have asked for a raise several times at this point. They were always being turned down because they are earning at market value for their position. Looked it up, and market value is determined by a simple equation that takes into account other people in your profession at your experience level and with your job title within about 100 miles and calculates average wage for them. Considering the extreme specialty of this position and being located in a remote region, market value is determined by calculating the average wage of everyone on Person's team. Basically, the company was saying, "Shut up, we aren't giving you a raise." Now, something to understand Person and their team members weren't that disappointed not to get a raise every year. However, they were now making only a little more than a new hire with the company, and there are other companies that do similar but less specialized work in the area, but start people out at with a higher wage than Person is making at this point. I literally knew high school grads with zero work experience that made more than Person did. Now at this point, Person has about 20 plus years of experience working this specific product, and the least experienced person on their team had been working it for 12 plus years. The straw that broke the camel's back was an annual investors meeting that was streamed live to the entire company. Person, working on a small team, was invited to take a few hours off to watch the meeting. It was kind of a reward for them for performing so well. The company shot themselves in the foot with this one, though it was already starting to go south anyways. They just sped it up a little. So to put this into perspective for you guys, the company total profit for that year, profit not earnings, was a little over 1.2 billion. Out of that 1.2 billion persons team of 12 people in a company hiring tens of thousands, mind you, these 12 people and a manager brought in about 480 million. That's a little over a third of the company's total profits for the entire year. For those that don't like math, that's about 40 million per person of pure profit. Person specifically earned a little over 60 million alone. The lowest earner on the team was over 20 million. Seeing that they were single-handedly responsible for over a third of the company's total profit for the year, the entire team got together and demanded a raise. The manager actually put that in before they even said anything. Even their manager thought it was wrong. They demanded $20 an hour. They actually only wanted half of that. But since they were being low-balled and completely unappreciated by the company for the work that they did, they put in a higher number. BTW $10 is about the amount they would have been making with their yearly bonus had it never been discontinued. As you might expect, the company being money-hungry came back with the same response as usual. Didn't even try to negotiate. They asked several more times over the course of a few weeks, threatening to quit if they didn't get a raise, and the company basically just said, "Go on, anyone can do your job." Cue malicious compliance. They didn't all quit, only 3 of the 12, which if you've been keeping up would add up to on average $120 million over 1 year. But that's not all actually what they did end up turning out even worse for the company. The rest of the team all agreed to only work their minimum requirements. The company had minimum requirements that everyone had to meet. This team, up to this point being proud of the work they put in, consistently exceeded the requirements many times over. They would compete to see who could perform the best. The lowest earner on this team often exceeded minimum requirements by 3 times over. At the end of the year, the company had to painfully explain to investors why their highest earning department was now performing at less than half what it did the previous year. They came up with some stupid explanations. They still refused to give a raise, though. Instead, what they decided to do was raise their minimum requirements. At first, the team kept up, but eventually, out of aggravation, when their constant requests for a raise were denied, about half of the team requested transfer off. They were transferred to other depths and replaced with brand new employees, the most experienced of which had been with this company for about a year. These new employees struggled to keep up with the minimum requirements, which kept getting raised to meet stockholder expectations. Eventually, original member on the team had either quit or transferred to another department, even the manager. This left the team with only new employees who had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They completely alienated the vast majority of their former customers almost overnight. And if that wasn't enough, because they could not meet the extremely high demands of the company, still only a fraction of what the original team was performing, they were either let go or transferred to another depth and replaced after only a few months on the team. Even hiring several times the number of employees on that team did nothing. When they reported earnings of $80 million from that team, the company got so fed up with it that they just sold the product to another company for an enormous loss. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those "the company drove them out of business" stories, but I still think it's pretty funny and I like to tell it to all of my new friends. I also use it to warn anyone who might be considering going to this company to work. Honestly, you'd think that if someone earns that much profit for your company, you'd at least try to keep them around. Edit. So I keep getting comments saying that this post has bad grammar and is too vague. First of all, the vagueness. So, person's original employment contract included a clause that prevents them from releasing company information to the public. Basically, any issues with the company must be arbitrated, and anything defamatory about the company could result in a lawsuit. I do not want either person, any of their co-workers, or company to be identifiable for this reason. So yes, this is purposefully vague, and no, I will not expand on anything. So please do not ask for more details. As far as the grammar goes, I apologize for my bad grammar. However, I am not perfect and do not intend to go back through and edit my entire post. You have Saturday detention for being late to school all week, and you better be on time next week. Okay, I'll just bring my child. The malicious compliance was more than perfect. By simply doing the bare minimum, the team exposed the company's greed and incompetence, leading to catastrophic losses. The loss was indeed massive. This is why companies should take care of their employees more than their customers, because only a happy employee can make your customers happy. RIP corporate greed. The story is from Heirloom, the parking feud that finally got a solid solution. Hopefully a good one for you. Sorry for any mistakes, as English is not my first language. A few details are changed for anonymity. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us, so having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next-door neighbours, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbour drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers, and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot, if their lot was ever full. But the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, shot back, "Go ahead," probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbour stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to fine vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window, if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue, and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing spaces to freeloaders, wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores, and if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbour, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out, making it very clear that, under no circumstances, would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea. Big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big, burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier. They quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscapers' employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras, just in case the neighbour tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful maneuvers to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to maneuver. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure. The next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part. We noticed that the neighbour's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my co-worker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time, but didn't think much of it until the following week, when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit embarrassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. TLDR. Neighbouring landscaping store took up parking, refused to cooperate. We followed their instructions and blocked off our lot and set up parking enforcement cameras. Within a week, they got fined and came begging us to waive it. Boss simply told them it's out of our hands. Now, our lot is clear, and we're happier than ever. This story is a masterclass in passive-aggressive revenge. A retail store owner, tired of a neighbouring landscaper's refusal to cooperate on parking, takes matters into his own hands. He blocks off the shared parking lot with big rocks and installs parking enforcement cameras. The landscaper's family, who had been taking advantage of the parking situation, are left frustrated and embarrassed, especially when they start receiving fines. The retail store owner's response to their pleas for help is priceless. It's out of our hands. Story from a quiet borderline. My French stepmother learns the hard way that Americans can cook. This happened today, and my brother and I are still being laughing about it, except Gabrielle, said stepmother, and Dad, who is embarrassed. Dad came into town to visit my brother, let's call him Mark, and me for a few days, and brought Gabrielle with him. Gabrielle has her good traits, but she does have this one really nasty trait. She is notoriously picky critical when it comes to food. You know the stereotypical snooty and rude French character in movies, books who always complains, "That is not how this is done in France." She's this way when it comes to food. Going out to eat with her is embarrassing. She constantly sends back food, is insistent on food being made a certain way, and always demands certain things done a certain way. One time, she asked the waiter to bring some mustard to the table. Not 2 minutes later, she called him back because the mustard is old. Bring us a new, unopened bottle. More than once, I've had to apologize to the waitstaff on my family's behalf and told the manager that I will vouch for them should Gabrielle leave a bad review on their site. She's made waiters and managers cry. She's that bad. Honestly, I have no idea why Dad puts up with her when she does that, even though I know he's just as embarrassed as Mark and I are. We can only chalk it up to Gabrielle having a magical hoo-ha. When they got here yesterday, for some reason, they insisted they wanted to go out to dinner. Dad recommended our new favourite new diner, which is known for its breakfasts at any time of the day. We live close to a major interstate, and the saying about truckers knowing all the best diners and holes in the wall in all 50 states, and then some, is true. It's a greasy spoon in every sense of the word. Right out of the 1950s, every leather booth filled with truckers or locals, waitresses who automatically know their regulars' orders by heart and don't put up with crap from anyone. A bustling kitchen, and while spotless, is just worn enough to let you know many people have been there. In other words, it has character. It may not look like a 5-star restaurant. It has some of the best breakfasts you're ever going to eat. I was hesitant to take Gabrielle there, if only because I didn't want to ruin the staff's day. Mark and I have been there enough times that the wait staff cooks know us. However, Dad wanted Gabrielle to experience a true American classic and was offering to pay. So off we, reluctantly, went. Luckily, we got there during a not really busy time, so I told Dad to find a parking spot and I would go in to get us a table. The reason I did this was so I could warn the staff about Gabrielle and apologize in advance for anything she did. Fortunately, our usual waitress, let's call her Mary, thanked me for the warning and warned the rest of the staff. We go in, get our booth, and Gabrielle tries pulling her usual stunts. I won't go into everything she did because we'll be here forever, but I'll leave a highlight reel. One point Gabrielle sent Mary back 3 times with the coffee because, in order, it was too cold, it was too hot, and not enough cream. Finally, Mary, who doesn't let anybody push her around, just slapped the coffee pot on the table along with the cream sugar and told Gabrielle to make do because she wasn't going back to get her damn coffee. This made Mark and me chuckle and Gabrielle steam. 2 while waiting, and probably still stewing from Mary's little comeback with the coffee, Gabrielle decided to accost Stephanie, who had just started, and tell her to get some fresh biscuits. Not ask. Tell. Poor Stephanie, who is understandably anxious about her job, does as told. And then Gabriel made a fuss about the packets of butter not being soft enough, despite Stephanie explaining that all the butter was kept cold for safety reasons. Gabrielle made a snide remark about how Stephanie couldn't wait 5 extra minutes to let the butter soften, which made Stephanie tear up and me about ready to tell Gabrielle to go f*** a French chef if food was that important to her. 3. When our meals did arrive, Gabrielle was quiet during the meal, not making comments. I was unsure what was going to happen as a result. Either she really liked it, which I doubted, seeing as I've never seen her compliment anyone's cooking whenever we've gone out, or she was planning some nasty barb, which I feared. When Mary dropped off the bill, Gabrielle took it before Dad could and said she was paying. Because I was sitting next to her, Gabrielle left a big fat 0 in the tip line and left a note about "It's cute that American chefs think they're good cooks when they've never stepped in a real kitchen before." Prove me wrong. Before closing the little book, the receipt came in and hiding it so nobody else could see what she wrote. I was pissed when I read that note and was about ready to slap Gabrielle. I know the chef servers who work at this particular diner learned their skills on the job, and if you ask me, they have every right to be as proud of their work as someone who went to culinary school would be. While I'm looking at going to culinary school myself to become a pastry chef, I respect people who've learned by working in kitchens on the floor because they have first-hand experience. I took out $100 using the ATM at the diner and gave it to the staff as a tip, along with an apology for her behavior, embarrassed and angry. Fortunately, they didn't hold it against us, except Gabrielle, and told me that Mark and I were always welcome back. I also decided I was going to get back at Gabrielle. There was a benefit to this lockdown. During this time, bored out of our wits and wanting to better our skills, Mark and I have been binge-watching recipe and cooking how-to videos online along with practicing. And while I don't like bragging, I'd say we've become quite good. We know how to smoke our own bacon, cure corned beef, make creamy scrambled eggs, and bake flaky croissants. And that's just a sampling. When we got home, I told Mark my plan, and he was grinning ear to ear. The next day, while Gabrielle and Dad still slept, Mark and I got up early and got right to work. We prepared scrambled eggs, home-cured, smoked bacon, biscuits, and a fruit salad. Dad woke up early and smelled the breakfast, waking up Gabrielle by saying that the kids were making breakfast. Dad came downstairs first, and Mark asked him to set the table. Gabrielle came down as we were finishing up, and she sits down, not offering to help. While Gabrielle commented about how it smells just like a restaurant she went to in France and couldn't wait to taste everything, Mark and I served Dad and our plates before putting everything back. Gabrielle looked at us, confused. I looked at her. "Oh, I thought you were going to a French cafe for breakfast," I said. "You did write on the receipt at the diner that you thought it was cute. Americans think they're good cooks if they haven't set foot in a real kitchen, and you wanted someone to prove you wrong." Dad looked at Gabrielle, his eyes wide as all the color drained from Gabrielle's face. "You wrote what?" "Well, hop to it," I said, sitting down. "Enjoy your French breakfast with your French chefs." Gabrielle's face reddened before she left. I don't know if she was embarrassed or angry, but we were able to have a nice breakfast without any of Gabrielle's complaining. She did come back after getting breakfast and has been nice and quiet all day. Hopefully she's learned her lesson and Dad grows a backbone. Update. January 27th, 21. Ripe my inbox. Holy smokes. I'm glad most of you enjoyed my story and had their own stories to tell about Gabrielle's in their lives. I'm so sorry you have to deal with people like her as well. They really are the worst and give both good French and step-parents a bad lesson. Dad and Gabrielle were supposed to stay with us for a few days before I returned to work next week. All 4 of us got sick with the bug at one point or another during the last 6 months and have remained symptom-free, thank goodness, so no need for us to quarantine once they arrived. They left this morning, but not before they had a vicious argument last night after my brother and I went to bed. And when I say vicious, I mean it was so loud we could hear every word. Thank God the neighbors couldn't hear, otherwise we might have had the cops called on us. Dad chewed Gabrielle out on what she wrote on the receipt and reminded her that she had promised him she'd be on her best behavior. After all, this restaurant was special to not just Mark and me, but Dad as well. Gabrielle defended her actions, saying that it was not what she likes, etc., until she finally blew up and revealed the real reason she threw that tantrum in the restaurant. It turned out Dad was planning on surprising Gabrielle on a trip to one of the best restaurants in town to celebrate the anniversary of their first date, which was yesterday. She had found the reservations by accident and thought they were going to it the night they arrived, when he was planning on taking her tomorrow to make it a real surprise. So, us going to the Greasy Spoon instead of the super nice expensive restaurant really upset her, and she thought he was catering to his kids instead of her. The argument finally ended when Dad took to the couch downstairs, fed up with her BS. So they left this morning. Dad did tell me before they left that he was going to have a serious talk with Gabrielle about her behavior, and that until she learned her manners, he was not going to take her out anymore, even to our place. Hopefully that will be either the wake-up call to Gabrielle to behave, or to Dad that he should get out. Oh, and to those who said this story is fake, one person asking how we were able to smoke bacon, for your info, we have a pellet grill, smoker, and we constantly are curing and smoking bacon because it's so good. Don't you guys have anything better to do? The malicious compliance was perfect. OP and his brother outmaneuvered Gabrielle's snobbery with skill and patience, letting her own words trap her. The breakfast revenge was subtle yet devastating, forcing her to face her arrogance.